أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له ونشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله اللهم لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما وارزقنا فهم النبيين وحفظ المرسلين اللهم افتح إلينا حكمتك وانشر علينا رحمتك يا ذا الجلال والإكرام وصل اللهم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله الكرام ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم and Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. This is the first inshallah of a series of podcasts that we are planning to do on the science of Islamic eschatology. And inshallah, I am going to be looking at the science as an ilm in general and in specificity as well, how it was studied in our tradition, why it now needs to be given paramount importance, and the consequences of abandoning the science or not giving it its due import. And I'll be looking at a wide variety of topics and subjects that are covered in the science, what its true definition is, and how really it should be studied as a discipline, as an ilm in Islam and in our tradition. So inshallah, if you have any questions, you can send them over to me and I will try to incorporate the answers into the future episodes as and when they are recorded and then uploaded. And so without much further, let me begin, inshallah. Traditionally in our sciences, it is always important to define your terms. Whenever you get into a discussion about anything, it is very important to define your terms, to define what they mean, what they entail, and that's really part of the science. And it's something that I will also cover in episode 2 when I talk about the Mabadi Ashara lil Ulum, the 10 principles of every science in our tradition. But just to get us started, what is the definition of eschatology? The word itself, eschatology, as an English word, is derived from a Latinized form of the Greek word eschatos. And forgive my pronunciation, I don't really know how to pronounce these classical languages like Latin and Greek, which I don't think many, even specialists in those languages, know how to pronounce them as well. They are considered dead languages and they've sort of lost their tajweed. So eschatos really means the last or the furthest or the uttermost, the extreme in both time and space. And it is a suffix which, when applied now with ology, eschatos, and then eschatology, it is the science of the last or the final or the climax of something when things culminate. It's also the same root from where the word escalation comes from. So the escalation of events as it pertains human history. The study of eschatology has always been part of theology. It's always been studied as a piece of theology. In fact, in any of the 3 theologies from the Abrahamic faiths, as they are called, the theology itself or the creed of each theology is incomplete without eschatology as part of it. And this goes back to Dinul Fitra, which is also Dinul Islam in all of human history, where the 6 tenets, what we identify as the 6 tenets of Iman, have always remained the same. They have never changed regardless of which denomination they were sent to, which is the belief in Allah as one, the belief in His angels, in His scriptures, in His messengers and prophets, in His power, His qudra, and then belief in the akhirah, which is a return back to Him. So humanity has come from the one God and will return back to the one God. And that's the eschatos part, the eschatology right there. So it's always studied as part of theology, and it has essentially 4 components, four comprehensive components, which is death, judgment, and then heaven or hell. So there is a death, which is al-maut, and then there is maut al-kubra, and then maut al-sughra, which is a major death, like the death of all of humankind as a species. And then there is the death of the individual. So each individual experiences a culmination or a finality in their existence, and that becomes their eschatology individually, and then all of humankind will experience its own eschatology. And then there are similar terms that are applied in general speech, not specific, but in general speech, that are related to eschatology or the eschatos. One of the technical terms that is often used is the word apocalypse, which is a very interesting word. It is used in conventional speech as part of some sort of sensational application, most commonly found in science fiction and film and media and these type of things. But the word apocalypse is a very interesting word, which means revelation or disclosure, which comes from the Latin church, or the church Latin word, because Latin was a pagan language until it then got adapted into a religious language. In the same way that the Arabic language was a heathen language, it was a pagan language until the revelation of the Quran, then it became a scholastic language. So from the church Latin word apocalypse or apocalypsis, which means revelation, which is also derived from the Greek word apokalyptein, which means to uncover or to disclose or to reveal, with the affix apo, which means off or far from or away from, means it's further down the line. It's not here yet, but it is impeding, it's on the horizon. And then kalyptein, which means to cover or to conceal. So to cover or to conceal or to remove the cover. So this is essentially what the apocalypse really is about, where though you have all this doom and this destruction and this cataclysmic events taking place, all that is meant to uncover now the true reality that is awaiting humankind. Then you've got words like, or phrases like, the end of the world or the end of times, which are really substandard words, and anyone who wants to go into this science on a serious level should avoid using words or terms that do not have this specific, because every science demands specific terms, and the use of conventional language in sciences really diminishes and deteriorates and lowers that science in its grade. So words like the end of the world and end of times, these are not scholastic terms. They're used in just day-to-day speech, and they're really empty terms. Or they could be used in sensational language and things like these. In and of themselves, they don't make any sense per se, because the end of the world implies that that if humankind ends, then everything else also ends, which is an incorrect statement, because the world is independent of the human being. It is very egocentric to think that way, to think that everything revolves around us. That if human civilization was to stop, then, the whole galaxy or the whole universe is just going to fall apart, right? It's sort of, that's what it implies. And the same thing goes for end of time. It's not really the end of time. The time itself does not end if humankind ends, because time did not begin when humankind began. Although from that phrase, there is a subtle meaning that is applied to that if that phrase is defined by us saying that it relates to human history or the human times or the age of humanity, right? So we're talking about the end of time or the end of human times, not the end of time itself. Now, it's important to understand that on that note, because everything that has a beginning has an end. And this is something that is part of our fitra. It's part of that a priori knowledge that every human being has within them and cannot ignore that knowledge. They can try to mask it or hide it, but in one way or shape or form or another, that knowledge is in there and is acknowledged, whether openly or in concealment. And this is knowledge that is part of our fitra. So eschatology, or understanding that there is going to be an end, is part of our fitra. However much we may try to come up with all these different theories that stir us away from that sort of thinking, which is part of what the modern world is attempting to do by using science as an instrument to propagate this idea that human civilization can continue on and on and on for thousands of more years, hundreds of thousands. And it's part of their whole worldview as to how we got here, because where we came from and how we came here can give us an understanding of where we're going and what our destination is going to be. So if the idea is driven by a worldview that is reliant on, say, something like the evolution of species, right, where they can talk about human civilization being 200,000 years and then evolve from another species for some whatever million years, and then so on and so forth. Ergo, we can still continue going onwards for another 200,000 years and another million years, and then evolve into something else for another 5 million years, or so on and so forth, and on and on and on. Basically, whatever the world that we occupy will also keep on going on and on for billions of more years. So it's not really the end per se. It's not something we really need to worry about or think about, which is an attack on the fitra of the human being, the innate nature of the human being, because such a knowledge is already part of us. And you'll find that the same knowledge is an imprint in the Quran. So it's very interesting. Ibn Juzay al-Kalbi, in his Tasheel li-Ulum al-Tanzil, he identifies 7 themes that can be found in the Quran. And what's interesting in my study of psychology is that I found that these 7 themes are also found in the a priori knowledge that human beings have. Meaning that the human being has got these 7 priori knowledges that are also as an imprint in the Quran. And I could be wrong in my theory, Wallahu a'lam, but this is what I have found. And you will find these 7 themes that are in the Quran, which is ilm al-rububiyyah, ilm al-nubuwah, ilm al-ahkam, ilm al-wa'd, ilm al-wa'id, ilm al-qasas, and then ilm al-ma'ad. So you've got the knowledge of lordship, that there is a creator, and the creator is also a nurturer and the sustainer of all of creation. And then there is knowledge of prophethood and prophecy, that the creator sends one from among us with knowledge that is purely divine, that is not based off any form of induction or deduction from this planar material reality. It comes directly from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through this medium chosen as a prophet. And then there is knowledge of the law and the ordinance that the creator has put in place, by which all of reality must govern within. And that includes the human social order, which is a small portion in relation to the entirety of the world. You know, the earth has its own laws by which it functions. Every ecological system has its own laws, and then the entire universe has its own laws by which it functions. And any physicist will tell you that it's truly remarkable to see how the whole of the universe, from the macro, from the largest of celestial bodies right down to the smallest particulate subatomic particle, each thing works like clockwork, like to precision, that it does not bend the law in any way, right? So this is the law and the ordinance that God has put in place. And then there is knowledge of the promise and the knowledge of the admonition as well, that if you abide by the law and you please your Lord, then there is a reward that will await you. And likewise, if you deny and you disobey and you become arrogant against that ordinance, then there is also a punishment that is awaiting you. And so even in our psychology, this is deeply rooted. In contemporary terms, it would be called the carrot and the stick. It's the 2 things that motivate human beings. It is reward or punishment. And so that's also deep-rooted within the human being. And then there is knowledge of the stories, the qasas, which are not stories in the same way that we read like storybooks and fictional tales and these kind of things, but that there is a recounting of what has happened before, and we are able to do this as human beings. When we are young, our parents, our grandparents, our elders would tell us these stories of their own past or their ancestors or forefathers or such and such occurrence in history, right? And this is part of our nature as human beings. We are storytellers, and this is how language develops within us. Language as human beings is not primarily a written entity. It is primarily an oral, a spoken entity. It is how we transmit what has happened. Even if it is something we are transmitting in terms of knowledge, it is still transmitted orally in terms of what was learned. So this is the transmission of the knowledge of the past. And then the last piece here, which is what our focus of this series is ilmul ma'ad, which is the knowledge of your eschatologies now. And ma'ad is what it comes from the root word aada ya'udu, which means to return or to go back to. So ilmul ma'ad is really comprehensively the science that examines this return back. You've got the sciences that examine what has happened before and what is happening now, and where we have come from to reach this particular junction in our journey as a species. And then there is the science that is specifically dedicated to the going back or the return back now to our source origin, which is essentially our destination, which is another interesting thing, that the destination is not different from the source origin. The destination is the same as the source origin. You left home, you went out on a journey, and now you've come back. You're coming back home, and that's your destination. That's your real destination. And what differentiates you from your source origin and your destination, which is again the same source origin, but what differentiates your leaving and your arriving is the manner in which you have arrived. It is the manner in which you are coming back to your Lord, not so much as the manner in which you departed from your Lord. You departed from your Lord in an infantile state, both biologically as well as spiritually, and you're going through this journey to undergo a certain transformation. And then now you're coming back from that transformation. How are you coming back? In what state are you going to return back to your Lord? And so that's what ilmul ma'ad is really about, the science of eschatology. And this is why it has always been studied as part of theology, or in our tradition as part of Aqidah. And if you look at any of the Aqidah, the four that have been agreed upon by the Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, which is the Aqidah of Imam al-Tahawi, al-Ash'ari, al-Maturidi, and al-Athari, which is also then regarded as al-Hanbali. Those four, all of them have got a section on the eschatologies and the requisites that have to be believed in insofar as the eschatology is concerned, or insofar as the whole Aqidah is concerned. Because as we mentioned, that it's one of the tenets of the 6 tenets of Iman. And traditionally, if you examine all the prophets and messengers that have been sent to the earth to deliver the message, their message may have differed from peoples to peoples. The what you would call the particulates or the semantics of it may have differed. Each one was given a slightly different sharia, from which a different fiqh was established based on their circumstances, their time, their generation, the age that they were living in, and all whatever else. But the theme, the core theme, the essence of it has always been the same. Every messenger has always carried the same message, which is very interesting, because if you look at philosophers, for example, philosophers will always disagree with each other, even from student to teacher. They will always disagree with each other because philosophy is a subjective field of study. Each individual is applying their own generated thought, and that's what makes them have disagreements, because they're all projecting their own understanding and their own deductions and their own conclusions. But if you look at all the prophets, it's really astounding. Though you've got between some prophets, you may even have hundreds of years of gaps, but they still have the same message to the letter. And that message is contained within this theme that they have. And this theme has got three components, which is Tawheed, Nubuwa, and Akhirah. So they've got Tawheed, which is the unification of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then there is Nubuwa, there is this transmission of knowledge directly from Allah through this messenger or through this prophet. And then there is Akhirah, which is, so all these three are inescapable. This is why it is part of our fitra, and to ignore that or to deny that is to go against your very nature, or to ignore your very nature, and to essentially condemn yourself to eternal damnation. So this being an introduction, an introductory episode, I'm going to stop here for now and have it just short and brief. And inshallah, in the next session, I'm going to look at the 10 principles, what are known as Mabadi' Ashara lil Ulum, the 10 principles and how they apply to the science of eschatology. سبحانك وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا يا مولانا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين بارك الله فيكم والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته جزاكم الله خيرا.